speaking of having a power, you wrote an article recently, which I think everyone needs to read this. It says campaign 2024, not left versus right, but affluent versus everyone else. It says the realignment of major parties away from blue against red and towards a rich versus poor dynamic is America's most undercovered political story. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I do feel like this is where we're headed. And I feel like there are a lot of people that kind of like jump in whenever you bring up this issue about top versus bottom or rich versus poor. They will jump in as deflectors and try to bring it back to Donald Trump or try to bring it back to, we could get the crazy far right and not comment on the issue of poor and affluent. And I don't know if you saw this video recently. There was a video went viral called Alabama Mama, where she just went on this rant talking about how it's basically this, affluent class now and everybody else is at the bottom, where the middle class has pretty much been wiped away. And I want to get your opinion about that, because I feel like heading into 2024, I'm seeing it again where a lot of people are focused on, you got to go vote for Biden because we don't want to get Donald Trump, not mentioning the fact that both of them are corporate and both of them are affluent. So either way, if you're poor or if you're working class, you're still going to lose. And it just seems like to me, you would think that the majority of Americans would get this by now. But I feel like there's a lot of people who still really believe we have to vote for one of these teams, whether it's red or blue. And I want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is something I've thought about for, I don't know, almost 20 years now. I've been covering presidential campaigns since 2004, and it's something we started to notice, I think, in 08 and then especially in 12, is this pretty dramatic change in the composition of the electorate. So just to take an example, if you go back to the year Clinton was elected in 1992, the most affluent congressional districts were somewhere between 60 and 65% likely to be Republican back then. So the top class sort of 1% voter was sometimes sort of self-interestedly voting for Republican politicians, either for tax reasons or because they were actually politically conservative or whatever. But in the period since then, the Democrats really stressed this idea of, we're moving away from being backed by unions. We're going to vote for NAFTA. We're going to start competing for donations from Wall Street. We're going to help deregulate, allow the Citigroup merger, deregulate commodities trading, all these things that led to the 2008 crash. And the Democratic Party, I think, basically left behind all of its class-based politics, moved to this paradigm where they campaigned almost entirely on social issues like, choice, which isn't bad. It just means that it's different, right? They were getting a different kind of voter. And now, Marcy Kaptur from Ohio, I put this in the piece I wrote, she put a chart up showing like the richest congressional districts in America and the poorest congressional districts in America. And you can see that on one side, it's almost all blue, and at the bottom, it's almost all red. And she was saying, how is it possible that the Republicans are representing the people who are struggling now? And that's the reason for that, is that there's been this shift in how you predict who's going to vote for whom now. Income and education are the absolute predictors over and above almost anything. It used to be like, the abortion issue used to be reign supreme. That's really not the case anymore. Income and education almost signify almost completely. If you live in a very affluent suburb, almost everybody's a Democrat. And the problem with that is that it's left the kind of vanishing middle class voter that you refer to without any good choices. The only choices they had in 2016 that made sense were Bernie, but Bernie, of course, was not going to allow to be become the Democratic nominee, or this furious nihilistic protest vote, which was Trump. And obviously they voted for him, and I think it's important to understand why. But this all has to do with money to me, and the fact that it's become so much harder for people at the lower end of the spectrum, and nobody will talk about it because nobody wants to admit that dynamic exists.
100%. Because one thing I've noticed over the years too, when we look at a lot of the coastal cities, these coastal states like California, Massachusetts, etc. This is pretty much where the Democratic Party kind of lives now. Like they rely on the coastal academic elite. Even when we look at an organization like DSA, they moved in that direction as well. Like I went to a DSA meeting one time and I was just like, everyone in this room, and none of these people are working class,
right?
But they're championing these working class issues. But everyone in this room is pretty much like academic elite. And so I feel like the Democratic Party, they cater to that crowd now versus when Bill Clinton was in office and he really picked up the Rust Belt. He spoke to like the working class. He won states that Democrats would never win now. If you look at the electoral map. But I do feel like there seems to be, and you know this, having lived in New England, for example, there seems to be this kind of elitist, snobby attitude, especially if you've gone to one of the colleges here on the coast. Whereas like I went to Harvard, so I know this and I'm better than you. And you need to work harder, educate yourself. And that's why you don't understand these issues. And I've heard that type of rhetoric come from some of the most, proud, like liberal Democrat voters, where they will talk down to Trump supporters or people that are living in those red rural areas as if those people are beneath them, instead of trying to work together with them, talking down to the working class. And I think that can be a really big turnoff to a lot of people coming from those areas who are hard workers, but they didn't have the same opportunities that some people may have had who went to a school like Harvard, so to speak. So I've also seen a lot of these coastal cities go from working class to they're heavily gentrified, and it's now just for like professionals. I mean, Boston at one point was a working class city. That's not the case.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Today. And when these people are pushed out, like, where do they go?
There's an exodus of people who are moving to southern states, or they're leaving places like California to go to Texas, right? I mean, there's this sort of well-defined phenomenon that's happening. Some of it is sort of traditional white flight, but I think there's a new phenomenon on top of that that's political in the way that you're talking about. I started to worry about this after the 2008 crash. I remember going to a foreclosure court in Florida. They set up these sort of high-speed courts because they were foreclosing so many people they couldn't do it through the regular court system. So they brought these judges out of retirement, and they had these things called rocket dockets where people basically would come in and they'd be thrown out of their houses within 3 minutes. And there was a line of people, and you could see they were white, black, Hispanic, poor, middle class, like there was a whole range of people that was politically diverse. And the rage in that room was, you could like cut it with a knife. It was unbelievable. And I thought, this is untenable. This is not going to last for long. This is going to come out somewhere. Right. And I think that was part of what the seeds of the Trump movement were. I think the Occupy movement was correct when they identified this idea of the 1% versus the 99%, that there's a small minority of people who are doing great and everything makes sense to them, and then there's this sort of widening group of other people who have all kinds of complaints about all these different things. Some of them are working multiple jobs. Some of them, are navigating the ridiculous healthcare system that just makes no sense. And, bankruptcy is automatic if you get sick at a certain time. Like, there's so many reasons to be pissed right now. And they've been denied a real choice in how to deal with these problems. because there's like basically a status quo party that doesn't do anything, and then the other choice they have is just this ineffectual, nihilistic protest vote. But even so, they're going to do that instead of vote for the status quo, you know? So I think it's sad. You know, I remember talking to Bernie after 2016 and him talking about how he had so much affection for the Democratic Party because when he was a kid, they fought for poor people, and that's why he would never leave the party. But it's not true anymore. I don't think you can say that. There aren't kids like that growing up who feel that way.
Right. Especially when we look at like income inequality. And I know people that they've left these more expensive cities and they've moved further south. Like they've moved to Raleigh, North Carolina or Austin, Texas. But now like even those places are starting to become more expensive too, because they're having an influx of people coming in. So now it's like supply and demand where all these people are coming in and you need more apartments. And they're like, oh, so we're going to increase the rent because the demand is high. And so the solution to this problem is not to tell people just move down south. And because I used to hear that a lot of people say, just move down south. Florida's expensive now. You know, this problem is there needs to be some type of solution to this problem other than just move somewhere else because the place that you grew up in is unaffordable now. And I'm starting to see a repeat of what I saw after Obama. Like, some of those people that voted for Donald Trump voted for Obama.
Oh,
Some
yeah.
of them voted for Obama twice.
Yeah, and a lot of them came from these sort of formerly thriving, you know, factory towns in Michigan or Ohio or, you know, Youngstown or Flint or, you know, places where there was a middle class once that, you know, maybe they weren't educated, but they could have one income and a family would be relatively secure. There's a lot of anger in those places, as you know, right? I mean, that's not a mystery. And I think there was a lot of belief that Barack Obama was going to come in and he talked the talk for sure in 2008. I believed it. You know, he put distance between himself and Hillary Clinton. He essentially said that, you know, people are hurting out there and we have to do more, and you know, said he was going to allow you know, for instance, negotiation of Medicare prices, right, by the government, or reimportation of drugs, and all these things that sounded really great to ordinary people, like it mattered to them. And then he gets elected and, you know, nothing, right? So people are mad, and then they see Obama moving to Martha's Vineyard, which is like the absolute symbol of what you're talking about. Like, I remember Martha's Vineyard when I was a kid. It was a great place that was full of people who, you know, maybe they were fishermen. There were a few rich people, of course, obviously, but you could live there if you were just an ordinary person. Now you have to basically, you know, have be the Sultan of Brunei to have even a small house in Martha's Vineyard. And it's the symbol of this impenetrable upper class society that most people don't have access to. And seeing the former president move there and feel so happy about it, I think is upsetting to a lot of folks, right? And that probably triggers that move to somebody like Trump.
Right. And I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Jackson Hole, Wyoming?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
Yep.
Jackson
Similar
Hole,
thing.
exactly similar thing. It was a working class town for those who don't know. And then one day celebrities decided that it was a beautiful place and they should move there. So celebrities started buying houses in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And now the people who actually grew up there can't afford to live there because the celebrities came in. And so it's a constant problem. And that's why I'm saying, like, this is happening across the country.